So for the update for Tropical Storm Beta, the storm intensity has decreased a little further. So there's a little bit less concern about winds, even near the center. However, the combination of heavy rain and surge is still a concern for flash flooding, especially for coastal counties in those communities that are near the bay and also tidal tributaries. Inland Harris, Fort Bend counties have been removed from the tropical storm warning, however, based on the weakening storm. So here's the latest track forecast for Tropical Storm Beta. Right now, forecast to come very close to the Texas coast. It may make landfall. It's possible it won't. After it reaches the Matagorda Bay area, it's going to slow way down and then gradually turn to the north and northeast. It's possible it could even drift back offshore as it continues to track to the northeast. But the key point here is slow movement. You can see the positions at 4 p.m. Monday, about now, and then by 1 p.m. Tuesday, it really hasn't moved much at all. You can see 24-hour motion from there to the mouth of Galveston Bay. So a slow-moving tropical system we've seen today. It's been able to generate some bands of moderate rain, and so we would expect more bands over the next couple of days as it crosses the area. Here's a look at some of the latest wind gusts shown in red, mainly in the 25 to 35 mile per hour range at this point. That's a bit lower than we saw this morning. So not only is the storm weakening somewhat near the center, but the gradient and the winds north of the center are weakening slightly. But they're still up there. They're still gusting near tropical storm force in some areas, all up and down the coast. And we would expect to see that to continue, especially near the bands around the storm, both near the center and in the spiral bands around it. We'll see those wind gusts to tropical storm force winds. Here's a look at a recent radar loop, and you can see this kind of tells the story. The center of the storm, believe it or not, is down just southeast of Matagorda Bay. But there's really not much in the way of thunderstorms around the center at all. There's a big rain area off to the north, hitting many of the folks in our forecast area. You can see kind of darker reds here in bands moving in off the Gulf. Those are where we get our higher rain rates. And then this kind of smooth yellow area, basically from Houston northwest, that's more of a light to moderate rain. So what to expect in the next 48 hours? We expect you can see more bands developing coming off the Gulf, and these are what we think will produce these periods of heavy rain, potentially some flooding and even isolated tornadoes. Showing this just to show that chance of 58 mile per hour winds has come down now, just 5 to 10% in those areas there. Say from west end of Galveston down to Matagorda Bay. So again, wind is less of a concern as this storm is weakening, but we are focused on the heavy rain flood potential, really from a combination of the rain and the elevated tides. Speaking of the elevated tides, let's take a quick look through. Of course, we've been showing this quite a bit, so the scenario really hasn't changed. This is bay entrance, and let's focus on the upper right chart here. Relative to mean lower low water, the red line, the red curve here is the observed tide. So we've dropped down into a low tide now, and so in your communities around Galveston Bay, particularly on the island and Bolivar, you may have seen some improvement. But we're going to go up to another high tide tonight, well above 4, pretty close to 5. So unfortunately not too far below what we had last night. And you can see each successive high tide is a little bit lower than the last. So gradual improvement as far as the pure coastal flooding is concerned, but we will have lingering coastal flooding really for the next, at least the next 2 or 3 days. And you'll see the same picture here for San Luis Pass. I won't belabor it. You can see our high tide this morning up around 5.2, 5.3 feet above mean lower low water. That's above 4 feet above mean higher high water. And, just a gradual decrease with time in the high tides. Freeport, we'll just quickly go through these. Sargent, the tidal departure is not quite as high at Sargent, but with the dune erosion they had with Hannah and the high surf we've had with Beta, there's no doubt there's issues there as well, even though the surge level isn't quite as high as at some of the other sites. Eagle Point, once again, you had a high tide this morning up around 5 feet. Dropping down toward a low tide this evening. And so you may see some flooded areas recede, but then back to flooding overnight and tomorrow morning. And then each successive tide a little lower. I do want to say that sometimes the model is a little decreases things a little too quickly. So it's possible that high water may hang in a bit longer than indicated by these models. But you can see even Wednesday morning, the values are up around 4 feet, where we can get some minor coastal flooding. And then finally, Pier 21, again, very similar to some of the other curves we've shown. But the real concern here is it's not just coastal flooding, it's heavy rain on top of coastal flooding for our coastal communities. And we're going to have these periods of moderate to occasionally heavy rain, especially along the coast and perhaps a tier of counties inland from the coast. And you can see it broken down here by 24-hour periods, tonight and Tuesday. A good large area here of 4 to 5 inches on average occurring tonight and Tuesday. And then another 4 to 6 inches more over the eastern half of the area for Tuesday night and Wednesday. Beyond Wednesday, really very little rain. So it's going to be the next 48 hours that we have to get through. And what does that translate to? Basically, 5 to 10 inches for coastal counties and locally higher amounts up to 15 inches in any persistent rain bands. And the areas I'm talking about here are in the yellow and orange in our coastal counties. You can see there's some difference here. You might say, okay, yellow, that's 4 to 6, and orange is 6 to 10. But in reality, we're not sure where those local maxima will be. Is that 6 to 10 going to be over Chambers or maybe over Brazoria? So I would just refer to this whole yellow and orange area as a 5 to 10 inch zone. So that's going to include our coastal areas and perhaps a second tier inland. And then we drop off to more like 2 to 4 as you get, say, north of a Wharton to Houston to Dayton line. And then even lower amounts and kind of lower rain rates farther inland than that. And so consistent with that idea, you can see the excessive rainfall outlook. This gives you an idea of the flash flood risk for the event. And these red areas are the ones we had just highlighted for 5 to 10, locally 15 in this moderate risk area. And then just a bit further north, a slight risk, and then what we call marginal, meaning could still see some isolated flash flooding occurring up in the green area. And as we've hinted at here, the elevated tides have the effect of limiting the drainage in the coastal areas and also near tidal tributaries. And so they're also elevating those water levels. We've seen some minor flooding already around Dickinson Bayou and some of the other tidal creeks and bayous. And so you're starting with high levels from the surge effect, and then you're bringing in additional heavy rain. So those two factors play into our flash flood threat over the next couple of days. And then last but not least, we could see a few tornadoes. We actually had one storm today that took on some rotation as it was approaching the eastern end of Galveston Island. But that kind of waned a bit. So, within those spiral bands, we can't rule out a tornado or two, both today and tomorrow in the dark green area here. So, final slide here. We did have our highest tidal peak, we think, last night, and we should see gradual drops in the high tide levels going forward. So we will have continued coastal flood threat through at least Tuesday, but really through Wednesday. We're really concerned about the combined effects of the high tides and the locally heavy rain. And this is helping lead to a greater flash flood threat than if it was coastal tidal alone. Period of concern now is now through Wednesday. After Wednesday, the rain should move out. Our tides are trending down to begin with, and so much better Thursday and beyond. Tropical Storm Beta continues to weaken, so we've got less concern now about winds even near the center, but we still get tropical storm wind gusts, perhaps 40, 45 mile per hour near the bands, near the center, and also even outside. And then we can't rule out an isolated tornado or two in those spiral bands. Just as far as the confidence in the forecast, we're getting higher confidence now in the storm intensity as it's coming down. And also, of course, the ongoing tidal flooding. It's still uncertain exactly when and where the heavier bands of rain will occur. We know that the next 48 hours is the period of concern, but the timing and how intense the bands will be and where they will set up is still a little bit uncertain. A lot of our modeling does show a good amount of rain down near the center tonight, down near Matagorda Bay. But really, you could get those 10 to 15 inch amounts anywhere a heavier band sets up, over this couple of day period. So we need to be prepared for flash flooding in those areas.